who are looking to become certified or perhaps are certified through their undergraduate degree program and wish to continue on with the master's degree to kind of help them through their career, to go to the next level, so to speak. That's a good degree program for them to consider. And then also, we have the ministry side of our graduate school. We have a Master of Arts in Christian Ministry. It's a 36-hour degree. Sometimes folks feel that call in their lives to pursue some level of ministry, even if it's not a pulpit ministry per se, but it's a ministry. Perhaps you're interested in ministry of working with teenagers, at-risk youth, folks who are homeless, whatever it is that your passion is that God's placed in your heart. Master of Arts in Christian Ministry degree is a degree that is pretty versatile. So even if you don't feel called to be a pastor per se, but you do feel strongly led to some level of ministry, that's a good degree to consider as well. And then of course we have a Master of Divinity degree, which does kind of prepare you for pulpit ministry and beyond. And then of course, we do have the Master of Business Administration. So I'll spend most of our time talking about that, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have about anything that we offer. We also offer up to the doctoral level. So a person could go from undergraduate, graduate to doctoral level with us here. So with that being said, with the business administration degree, what we require is that you have at least a 2.5 GPA for entry. If it's a little bit below that, we'll be happy to look at it on an individual basis. But we feel that having at least a 2.5 undergraduate GPA helps you to be a little more successful as a graduate level student. No doubt you've worked very hard as a bachelor degree student, but once you go to that next level, there is a higher expectation in terms of the research that you'll do, the projects that you'll do, the information that you are acquiring. And so having at least a 2.5 GPA, being strong academically, is something we highly recommend because it is a rigorous program of study. It is substantial. There is something special about graduating with, an MBA or a graduate degree. So it's a substantial program. Also, we require 2 prerequisites for the program: accounting and statistics. I believe you guys take both of those as part of your curriculum, correct? Or at least one, okay. All right. You don't have to retake those classes if you've already taken them, as long as you have a B or better. And the reason why we have that requirement is because there's a class that you take as part of the MBA curriculum, which is called Business Analytics. And with Business Analytics, you get into the very quantitative side of an organization. You have to know if you are profitable or not. You have to look at the financial risk side to make sure that, if you acquire a different organization, like a merger, or if you're needing to sell off a department because it's not being profitable, you need to have the right tools to be able to make determinations like that, which means that you need to have the quantitative skills, qualitative comes later, we'll talk about that. Quantitative skills to be able to determine that. And so having those 2 prerequisites will make sure that you're properly prepared to take those classes. Also, as far as the requirements for admission, we do require 3 references, 1 personal, and I kind of like to explain that one as somebody that's not related to you but who knows you pretty well, and then 2 professional. So we've often had students who have requested references from their professors or from other people who know them from a professional standpoint. If you've worked either while in university or outside the university and have a professional individual who could complete a reference for you to speak about your effectiveness in the workplace, then by all means, I recommend asking. Don't just assume good practice to approach them and say, I'm very interested in looking at graduate school. Part of the admissions process is to have a couple of references on file so they can assess my readiness for graduate school. Would you mind, would you be able to fill out one for me, please? There have been times in life where I've encountered people who have just kind of assumed that someone would fill out one for them. That didn't go very well. So definitely recommend that. All right, so far we've talked about the 2.5 GPA, graduating with your bachelor's degree, and we've talked about the 3 references. We also require an essay, but don't get too excited about it. It's a short essay. It's a 500-word essay for us just to kind of have a writing sample of how well you are with your written communication skills. Because there is much writing at the graduate level, because you're really diving deep into your topics, we want to make sure too, that you are able to communicate very well from a written standpoint. And so, we encourage folks who apply either to our graduate school or elsewhere if needed, to make sure that your written sample shows your best abilities. So you want to make sure that you address those things. So typically, what students write about is the fact that they've completed their bachelor's degree, they're ready to step forward with an MBA, they have a career goal in mind, and talk a little bit about how an MBA would help them to achieve that career goal. So that's typically a good way to go in terms of having a topic for your essay and being able to communicate that to the admissions team for your review. Then, we've talked about the admissions process. There is an application, just like you filled out an application to come here as an undergraduate student, you would have one for your graduate studies here. It does mean that you will have not only on your transcript your bachelor's degree work, but now you'll have your graduate degree work all in one place, which is really helpful. Anyway, excuse me, let me get a little drink of water. Dry throat this morning. Sorry. Anyway, the application is found online. Actually, if you go to our homepage, NGU.edu, and you scroll down to about the middle of the page, you'll see where you'll have traditional, online, adult, and then you'll have graduate schools. There are little 3 circles in the middle, or several circles in the middle of the web page. You click on the graduate page, and then it'll describe the programs, and then there is a place there where you can actually click on to apply. And if you are looking to attend in the fall, or even this summer, because you could actually go straight from graduation. Some people like to have a little bit of a break, and that's understandable, but you don't have to wait. When you graduate in May, you can actually go on into the graduate level program at that time, so that you don't have to lose time in that. And so now is a great time to apply. I would also say too that no matter where you're considering you're going forward with graduate degree work, make sure you're on top of deadlines with that. Different institutions have various deadlines throughout the year. With us, we have 5 start terms per year. So we had one in January, we'll have another one in March, we have our May one, then August, mid-August, and then we have a term that starts in October. And so you have 5 different entry points during the year where you can actually join in and begin studies with us. So it gives you a few options. Not every school is like that. There are some institutions where you have maybe 2 entry dates per year. Ours is a program that can actually be done online or in person. So you can actually take the entire degree work online if you wanted to, which is helpful for folks who are working full-time or have other obligations outside of school. It works very well for our athletes as well, just because you're tied up with practices and competing in games and that sort of thing, so you want to make sure that you've got enough time to devote promote your studies as well as a full-time student. With admissions, when you apply, the code that you use to get out of the fee waiver, or to get out of paying the fee, we'll get out in just a second, I apologize for that, is grad free. It's all one word, grad free. Easy enough to remember, but you'll enter that in, and that way you don't have to pay the application fee. I think it's like $35. Save yourself some money, put that towards, stuff fun. And so what happens is we'll get your application in. We'll follow up with you on the materials that are needed in addition to the application for admission. Once all those items are in, then we'll go through and review everything. And we look at the references, we look at your essay, we look at your academic work, and then make a determination on whether you would need the prerequisites that I mentioned earlier or not. And that's pretty standard with any institution that you approach. And then we'll move through the admission acceptance process. So then we've gotten your items in, you're accepted, and then you have your advising just as you had for your bachelor's degree. It's a little different at graduate school, but you have an advisor who works with you throughout your program to make sure that you're registered for the correct classes. There is a course sequence with the MBA. So the idea is that you take certain courses before you take, as prerequisites, so to speak, before you take other courses, just as you've had to do in your bachelor's degree. Just to make sure that you have what you need to be able to progress through the program. I mean, it's not fair to you as a student if we put you in a class that you really needed to have another class first before you took it. That doesn't put you in the best position to be successful. So we try very carefully to navigate that well with you. As far as the program itself, if you do not have to take the prerequisites that I mentioned, there are 12 classes in the MBA. We also have an HR concentration. I'll talk a little bit about that. At this point, those are our current offerings. We may be expanding our graduate school offerings in the future. Right now, we have the MBA with the HR concentration. You don't have to do the HR concentration, but one reason why people typically opt to take that way forward is that with the MBA, you're getting a general administrative type of experience where you're talking about marketing, economics, the business analytics I mentioned earlier, organizational behavior. You are getting some HR in there as well. But having the general MBA and then focusing on a concentration in HR allows you to have kind of a wider skill base when you go to work. Oftentimes, what we often find ourselves in a position of is that we serve as HR managers whether we recognize that or not. And the reason why I make that statement is because we're often in a position, even if we're not specifically listed as an HR administrator, that we're making hiring decisions and that we are looking at employee behavior issues and that we're having to make decisions that are typically aligned with an HR function. So at least having a basic knowledge and kind of diving in deep to the HR function in an organization helps you to be in a better position, really. We have a number of folks who decide that they love HR so much that they want to be certified in that area as well. There are professional certifications, of course, for various knowledge sets that you can gain over your lifetime, and the certification for HR is SHRM. It's the Society for Human Resource Managers. And you can either be a professional HR certified professional or a senior professional certified. And what that means is that if you're interested in even thinking about working in human resources, which again goes across all industries, as does business, even if you work for a nonprofit, you still need to know business principles. It may be nonprofit in name, but there's still transferable pieces of information that you can use in whatever field you decide to go into or whatever industry you go into. But again, having that knowledge and being able to move forward with that gives you the, I guess, the step forward that you need to be considered for those type of positions. So with that being said, if you go the 12 course route, that is a 36-hour graduate level degree, university level credits, of course, fully accredited, just like your bachelor's program. And you can earn up to 30 credit hours in 1 year. So pursuing a master's degree is not like starting over with a bachelor's degree. You've got your 4 years, 4.5 if you're like me, or 5. I won't even talk about that. I was a music major, and so it took me forever to graduate, but I finally did, a long time ago. But you already have your bachelor's degree, so what you're doing at the graduate levels, you're building onto a specific area. And so you don't have to go for another 120 hours or whatever. It's a 36-hour degree. So that's your full program. So you can do it, if you went full time, you could do it in a little over a year, which is pretty quick. We often have folks who decide that they want to start off part-time and then maybe take full-time classes later. You do have that flexibility, although it's not as advantageous, because again, you do have a certain course sequence that you're wanting to go through to earn your MBA. If you can stick with that sequence, it's preferable. However, life happens, and we understand that as well. So that certainly has happened to me personally. So having an option to be able to pursue degree work, maybe not necessarily at a full-time capacity, but you're still taking at least one class, you're still moving forward. If you're in athletics, I know that they have a requirement of being a full-time enrolled student, so there is that caveat that you want to be aware of to make sure that you're in compliance. Anyway, with our program, as I mentioned, you can do it online or on ground, or you can do a combination. Sometimes folks don't feel quite comfortable taking a class like business analytics online. They want to have a face-to-face instructor with that. So that is an option as well. You can take your classes mostly online, but you may opt to take 1 or 2 of them or more on ground. So we do have those cohorts as well. Anybody happen to have any questions so far? I'll get into the financial aid part of it in just a moment, but does anybody have any questions so far? Yes, go ahead.
So in regard to those prerequisites, who makes that decision or that determination? So when one of these young men or ladies decides to apply, do you have an advisor or a counselor on your side that looks at their transcript and says, I really think you need this prereq, and so let's arrange that for you? Or is that something that we decide when we're applying?
Oh, okay. That's a great question. I actually look over the transcripts just to see when you might have taken those classes and what your final score was. So it's a pretty open and shut case. As long as you have at least a B or better in statistics and accounting, you can waive both of those prerequisites. If you have a C in statistics but a B in accounting, then we probably want to make sure you go back through statistics again to make sure that you have the background necessary to be successful. Again, specifically for that business analytics class that I talked to you about. So I actually do the review and consider it a joy to be able to do that. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the financial side of going to graduate school. It is a different level of investment than from your bachelor's degree. The program is obviously shorter, so that's a plus. And then also the cost per credit hour, tuition per credit hour is a little different as well. It's a different cost structure. So first of all, just kind of preface this part of our conversation. I always try to say that consider it to be an investment in your future. This is an investment in yourself, because your education is something that no one can take away from you. It's something you can take with you anywhere you go. Nobody can steal it. They can't burn it down. You know, your education is something that you truly own. It's one of the very few things in life we actually do honest with you. And so the expectation is that when you go to graduate school, you know, the idea is that this opens new doors of opportunity for you. I would say even especially if we have folks that aspire to be college level coaches, you know, people that want to coach students at the college level and university level. You need to have a graduate degree to even be considered for those types of jobs. So again, the idea is that the more you learn, the more you earn. Hopefully there's a correlation there. But there tends to be, yes. But with that, just to give you a few figures, currently our tuition for the Graduate School of Business for the MBA program is $4.95 per credit hour. So whip out your calculators, unless you do math in your head, and I'm not one of those people. $4.95 per credit hour. It's a 36-hour degree. That'll tell you a little bit about the approximate cost of the program in terms of tuition. If you have to take the prerequisites, you would add those 6 hours on, okay? So $4.95 per credit hour times 36 will tell you what the tuition is. Or 42 if you know you have to have the prerequisites. And then if you are thinking about the HR program, it's an additional 12 hours. It's 4 courses that you would add on to the 12, so that would be 16. And then we do have an $80 tech fee per term of enrollment. So not per semester, it would be per term. As I mentioned, we have 5 start terms per year, so typically the course load is that you would take 2 classes and then 2 classes and 2 classes on until you finish. So $80 per term would be 5 times 80, and then you'd have 1 term left if you're going full time, so that would be 80 times 6. To tell you what a technology fee approximation would be for you. One other item to think about is, as you have had for your undergraduate degree, Tree of Life, the textbook company that we are working with to provide your texts for your classes, you do have that option as a graduate level student as well. And so for our program, I think it's $30 per credit hour. And what they do is the same sort of scenario. They either send you an electronic code to utilize to access an e-text, or if that's not available, they will provide a textbook for you to rent. And so the idea is when you're finished with that book for the term, you want to ship it back to them. Otherwise, if you have a code, it expires at a certain date. So you don't have to necessarily be in the program. You can opt out as a graduate level student. However, if you're already accustomed to receiving your textbooks that way and it's convenient for you, then maybe it's something you would wish to continue. Then, as far as any other costs associated with the program, it would be whatever materials you typically think you would need to have in terms of your own, spiral notebook, or however you best function in a class, or, obviously your computer, you'll need to have that with an internet connection. Just like your other classes, you would be submitting your documents for class through Blackboard. So it's already a program and platform you're very familiar with, having gone through your undergraduate degree here. A couple of things that I like to share concerning financial aid is that, yes, you can apply for free application for federal student aid for graduate school as well. Keep in mind that if you have been a Pell Grant recipient in the past, those grants are specifically for your first undergraduate degree. So once you graduate, if you've received Life or South Carolina Tuition Grant or some of the other grants that people are typically accustomed to receiving in their bachelor degree program, those things do not carry over to graduate school. All right, so keep that in mind. But we do have folks, if needed, who can actually apply for loans. But let's talk about other sources of financial aid first before we get into that side. I know it's like, I don't want to go deeper into debt. No, We have a number of folks who end up working for employers who have tuition reimbursement programs. And so what that means is that you would either set it up somehow where you might pay up front for your classes or however, and then they reimburse you based on the grade that you earn. And so while there may be a little bit of an investment on the front end, the idea is that your company continues to cover that bill for you by reimbursing you for your expenditures. Some companies will go up to 100%. Some companies go 100% up to a certain amount. And typically that amount is $5,250. It's an IRS requirement that you can, they may cap it at $5,250. So that helps you definitely go towards your graduate level degree. And depending upon how you space out your classes, you know, it may be that you really don't have to come out with anything up really significantly from your own pocket to cover that. But there are, of course, employers who do that. And I encourage you that as you are seeking positions, do some research, and you don't want to have it in that first conversation that, hey, do you guys offer tuition reimbursement, you know, as a benefit? You don't typically have that in your initial conversation with employers. You wait until you're further into the process to get into a little more of that side of the hiring part. But it's certainly something that you want to take advantage of. I've often advised students that if you go to work for an organization and they have a tuition reimbursement program and you don't take advantage of that, then you're practically leaving money on the table. It's something to just think about. It's that your company is helping you invest in you. Also, graduate assistantships are certainly something worth pursuing, especially in athletics, because typically institutions have a number of teams where they need to have assistant coaches or folks who serve as trainers or however to help facilitate the team's needs as they continue their season that year. So whether you're considering a graduate assistantship here at North Greenville, or perhaps are considering that at a different institution, we want you to stay here, by the way. We want you right here. So we know and love you, so stay put. Anyway, graduate assistantships typically involve a number of hours for where you're working with a coach or with a team or there are other departments on campus. I know admissions in Tigerville here, they've had a need for a graduate assistant. I mean, there are different departments on campus who could use your help. And so I recommend asking around, like career services, you know, the different departments. I think student chaplaincy, that particular area are looking for, now I don't know the current status, but I know in the past we have been requested names for consideration to fill graduate assistant positions. So I definitely encourage you to look and see what options may exist for you as a continuing student here. Also, if you do have some athletic eligibility, last year we had a number of folks who had that extra year because of COVID. I don't know what they're doing about that this year, if they're still looking at doing something like that, particularly since we're still in a pandemic, it would be nice. But we'll see how that kind of plays out a little bit later this spring. But for those folks who had the extra year of eligibility, you know, we definitely encourage them to take advantage of that, because then you continue to be involved in the sport that you love and are here to do, but then also have the opportunity to continue your education. So, let's see, we talked a little bit about financial aid, cost per credit hour. Let me stop here and see if you guys happen to have any questions. Okay, wow, so it's crystal clear. Yes, sir,
Yes,
go ahead.
Did you happen to mention the scholarship that we have with Brazier for the early credits?
Thank you, yes.
I want to make sure that's still in play, because I haven't heard
It
about
is,
that.
yes. We have the Brazier Scholarship as well. I'll explain to you how it works. Out of your first 12 credit hours, so, okay, say you started fall 1, which would be your typical start date for August. So fall 1, and then fall 2, you were enrolled in classes there. We'll do it this way so you can see. So out of your first 12 credit hours, the Brazier Scholarship covers 4 credit hours out of each of those 4 classes. So in other words, you'll have 6 hours that you take in fall 1. So 2 credit hours would be covered by the scholarship in fall 1. And then fall 2, you would have 2 credit hours that would be covered with the scholarship out of those 6 hours. So out of your first 12 hours, 4 credit hours would be covered by the scholarship. And we offer that to help people get started into graduate school, to kind of help mitigate the costs a little bit. But it's a scholarship program that was generously donated and started by the Brazier family. They have been very invested in North Greenville University for a number of years and have had family who have attended here over the years as well. And so out of their generous hearts of love and service, they have graciously allowed us to offer such a scholarship opportunity to our folks. Typically speaking, if a person's an alumnus of North Greenville, which you are, or if they live in the upstate of South Carolina or whatever the area they're pursuing, then you would be eligible for that. Now, I will share this. If you are a graduate assistant, typically speaking, your tuition is fully covered with that. So if we have the scholarship for people who are not typically able to get graduate assistantships, because if you're a graduate assistant, then your tuition is good. You don't have to worry about that. So just one thing to keep in mind with that particular program. But yes, we do offer that. As far as other scholarships, I definitely encourage you to take time to look and see and do a little bit of research on what may be available to you. You might be surprised. Sally Mae, I believe, also has a graduate scholarship website. If you do a little Google search on Sally Mae, there may be some other options for you to consider through that website as well. And just remember, if it's a grant money, you don't have to pay it back, right? So that's awesome. All right, great questions. Any other questions you guys may have? And I've talked your ears off this morning. Thank you for being so kind and attentive. I know it's early in the day and it's Friday. So this is not easy unless you had your coffee before you came in here, or your Monster. I'm just trying to think if there's anything else that I would like to add. I would say that as far as people who've graduated from our MBA, they work in a variety of fields. As I've mentioned, whether you work in nonprofit, for-profit, a government type of scenario, whatever your desire is, or wherever you end up, these are skills and knowledge pieces that you can take with you into any industry. Whether you end up working as, in recreation with a township, or if you work for the state. I have an MBA, and at one point I even worked for the state of South Carolina in the Department of Social Services with economic benefits. So you can actually use it in a lot of different areas. It just depends upon where your calling is and kind of the path that you take forward. But I would say that if you do aspire to be in any type of position at a university, if coaching is something that you really feel strongly about and you wish to work in the collegiate arena, I would definitely recommend having that master's degree. That's going to be kind of a requirement for you.
So what about some of the new degrees that are being planned for the grad school? I know there's three or four on the docket already from coming out of my college.
Well, I have not been made privy to that information yet. Would you mind sharing about it, or are you at liberty to? Because I don't know details on those yet.
Come on, Dr. Briggs. Spoilers?
No spoiler alerts. Yeah. Usually if there's something that is in the works like that, we have to remain kind of tight-lipped about it for a bit. So there are some things perhaps that are in the works, but I'm not privy to what those are yet. So, But hopefully we'll know sooner rather than later, right? So that way you got some more options.
What about GRE or GMAT requirements, or if somebody's provisionally on the edge, how do you look at somebody who's right on the provisional edge?
Well, that's a great question. We do not require the GRE or the MAT or the GMAT for graduate studies at North Greenville University. What we look at though is that you have at least a 2.5 GPA. If your GPA is a little south of that, then what we typically do is work with the associate dean of the program, and her name is Dr. Tracy Kramer. So she would actually do a review of your information as well and help to make that determination on your readiness to enter into the MBA. So if you have a GPA that's like a 2.2 or a 2.3, that may be a little out of our range, but if it's close to 2.5 but slightly under, then we can certainly look at making a concession for that. And we recognize that things happen as you're going through your undergraduate degree. Life happens, and so what I typically recommend for students to do is if you have a GPA that's just south of a 2.5, address that in your essay. Talk a little bit about what happened. Maybe you had a family member that became ill that impacted your ability to focus on school, or, you know, I mean, goodness, I've been working on a doctorate for 11 years. 11 years. I can tell you a lot of life has happened in the past several years that kind of contributed to the length of my educational experience at that level. So sometimes you just have to take time to say, hey, this is what happened this year. This is how I overcame that. It's no longer an issue. You know, however you wish to address that. But that's a very good question to ask, and it's certainly something to keep in mind whether you attend here or elsewhere.
Yeah, so I would like to know, and you can reinforce this, the writing sample is important. I know students who have been turned down because their GPA is on the border and their writing sample is subpar. So
Okay.
when you're submitting a writing sample, you need to put a lot of effort into that.
Yes.
Because that is heavily scrutinized by the individual you identify, and that's
Yep.
a good thing.
Yeah, especially if it's a marginal GPA, we do have to really look at the written communication skills very carefully, because the GPA might not necessarily represent your success in the MBA program, but your writing skills, your written communication will tell us a bit about where you are, because we'll be able to see it in writing, so to speak. So, yeah, you want to make sure that you cross your T's and dot your I's.
So they assigned an advisor right away. Tell them how advising works as you get into a program and start going through.
Yes, so what happens is, once you get through the admissions process, then you're transitioned to your your academic advisor, and she will be Tina Wells. She is actually transitioning, if you're familiar with Tina, from the registrar's office. She would actually be your advisor, and so what she'll do is she'll talk with you about the course sequencing and make sure that you're registered for the proper courses. If you have an issue with one of your classes, happens from time to time, you know, things crop up. She would be kind of your first point of contact with that. She would also talk to you if, again, to remain in the program, you need to have a 3.0. Keep that in mind as well. So you need to have at least a 2.5 to get in, but to stay in, the requirement is a little bit higher. You have to have at least a 3.0. So that means that the work is there for you to do. If you're having issues, she would be your first point of contact to kind of help you to recognize what needs to happen next. But we do have that standard as well. Once you get in, to be able to stay in, you want to be sure you stay at that level.
Okay, why don't we field some questions for you?
Go ahead.
Let's field some questions.
I'm sorry?
Let's field some questions.
Fields? Yeah.
So you ask them if they have a question.
Oh, okay. You have any questions for me? Anything at all? How many of you guys are thinking about going to grad school? Okay, so we've got, folks that are looking at it very seriously. Awesome, well, that's exciting.
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
Why NGU grad school?
Why?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, my question is, why not? We know you, we love you, you know us, you love us. But yeah, why not? I would say, we are a program, again, we have a program that is accredited, fully accredited, just like your undergraduate degree is here. Also, it is a substantial degree. I mean, when you graduate with an MBA from North Greenville, that is a recognizable, substantial degree. It is a rigorous program, so when you graduate with an MBA, then your the impression that you have against, with your peers or with the general public is, oh, he got an MBA. He knows what he's talking about. So, yeah, I mean, it's a recognized program, it's a recognized degree. You already know us, we already know you. Hopefully you'll have an opportunity to be a GA here or continue with your athletic career. So that would help you on the financial end of it as well. So I think that there's some definite benefits for remaining with NGU. So that's an outstanding question. I think the lessons that you gain here through the MBA will complement your undergraduate work very well. And so you can just continue those studies and then move forward.
It's a seamless transition for those who are venturesome. Sometimes traveling around the country to find a grad school is kind of fun, but if you're not adventuresome and if you don't want to go too far from home, because you're already comfortable in North Greenville, it's a very seamless transition because we have your file entirely already in place. And we have all your financial aid paperwork and all your FAFSA paperwork, and we've already got your transcripts. So
Yeah.
the process to go from undergrad to grad at North Greenville is very smooth. And so if you don't want to be inconvenienced, if you're looking for a smooth, seamless transition, it's probably a little bit easier to get accepted because we have all this data on hand on file versus applying to a new school where you don't even know where the application process begins or you've never visited that campus.
Yeah, that's a great point too, because we have your academic history on file, you don't have to order it to have it sent to us. We can go into the system and find it. If you apply to other institutions, they're going to require you to submit an official transcript, which means you go through that process and then have to wait on that to be sent. They're pretty efficient about doing that, but it does mean that you have one less step if you go to graduate school here.
Thank you.
Very good. So did I sell you on it? I know.
Don't think about it.
Okay, great.
Ask her about the online thing you asked me, the value, the credibility value.
Oh, so what is the difference in the values of a presential degree and an online degree?
Oh, sure. Okay. All right.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I can say that the same content that you would get in an on-ground class setting would be the same content and experience really that you'd have online. It's just that the format's a little different. Also, with an online degree, and I'm glad you asked that, whereas in a classroom, we have face-to-face conversations and have discussions this way. You would have an online platform where you would have your discussions. Now, what that means is that there comes the strong written communication skills because you need to be able to express yourself well and professionally in an online discussion. But what it does allow for you to do is to really think deeply about the topic before you write, and then have time to write it, then to go back through and proof it to make sure it's professional, and then you post. So for folks who may not feel necessarily as comfortable in a on-ground setting face-to-face, they may prefer to do online because it does allow you to have that time to reflect before you post, number one. Number two, because online education has been around for so long at this point, it's readily recognizable in the professional world. What they look at is that you have earned a degree. And then when you have an interview with those individuals, whether it's for a position outside of higher ed or whatever it is, you have an opportunity to share about what you learned, what courses you took as part of that degree. So it gives you an opportunity to kind of sell yourself. The art of persuasion is something that we all have to have in life, whether we're trying to get a job, we're trying to persuade someone to hire us, or if we work with volunteers, we're trying to persuade them to work with us. You have an opportunity to kind of explain a bit about yourself. But yes, it is a recognized degree, whether you're on ground or online.
All right, thank you.
Thanks. Good questions.
Our time is up. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I did bring some items up here, my business cards and some pens.